Oh man, I feel old. I feel old, Achilles. Do you feel old?
Always.
I feel old. Oh, what are we going to talk about on this live stream? I remember, getting old lets you tell stories and reminisce. And I remember when I was talking to George, Reeswitz Senior, and he had this game.
Hell of a partier, man.
Yeah.
That kid was a partier.
Yeah, he was. Oh, he was great. He was great, man. I wish he was here last night.
Mhm.
But he made these little pieces out of lead. They were miniatures, and I got really upset with him. And I'm like, no self-respecting officer in the Prussian army should be playing with dolls. You're an adult. Use blocks. And then I explained to him the advantage of blocks and how the blocks take up exactly the space occupied. You can switch them out as units take losses. Well, the rest is history. Hello? I'm sorry. Yeah, we lost an hour of time last night because
our legislative process can't get their crap together and get rid of that.
Yeah, because time changed, and plus I was awake until 11:30. Look who's here in the office with me.
I got lost and ended up in Marshall's house somehow.
Yeah, what do you do? But yes, I had a birthday party last night, and so I'm getting old, and I'm ready to order off the senior menu.
Bluebird special, baby.
That's it. And I just remember, these times from my past, like, George and I sitting down coming up with Creeksville.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. Look at that. We got our look, I can't even tell you what side the little thing is on. We got a little IKS merch going on. But oh boy, are we having a party? Asks Jan. See, I've got my cane and everything here.
We had the party, Jan. Where were you, man?
Yeah, where were you? So you were telling me about you're going to modify these games.
Yeah. I mentioned
using Creeksville mechanics.
I mentioned these things before, but I bought this. Now this is the one that I modified for you guys.
Yeah, we played that.
Yeah, but I bought this. I bought this game set up on my table, and it was the advanced version of ETO and advanced version of ETO, and I've been complaining about it ever since because it is a morass to try to get through.
Yeah.
So I bought the earlier version, and okay. It's an example, guys, of how not to design games. These are the rule books for the earlier version right here. Okay, pretty simple, not hard to understand at all. These are the rule books for
the advanced
version. No, I'm not done. Okay.
Oh no,
this is just Europe.
That's already twice to that one, and
now there's the Pacific. Okay.
Wow, why is even thicker?
I don't know. I really don't. I'm just trying to get through this to figure out how to play the game. It's like that is not how you design a game. Okay. So I'm trying to modify what I like from the earlier one, what I like from the advanced one, and make it actually playable.
Well, my advice is just work from memory. What you remember from the war. This was the second one, not the first one.
Yeah.
Not the great one.
Not the great one. No, that was great.
Yeah, that was great. Those are good times.
That puts iron in a country's back.
There we go. That was good time, But yeah, absolutely. I think you should do, because the thing is we talked about this before the show. The players don't know. And the players don't need to know the rules, and you don't want the players to know the rules because they will game the rules to gain an advantage they would not have on an actual battlefield. So you could actually do what we call bog sat, which is bunch of old guys sitting around a table
Mm-hmm.
and just call it.
Mm-hmm.
So why not do it that way? Or some amalgamation of the rules that you just kind of make up on the fly. I mean, you know that you don't need to know all the rules to resolve a combat. You know that if a destroyer screen launcher, a destroyer squadron, I should say, launches a salvo of torpedoes towards a fleet, you just have to resolve the torpedo part. You don't have to worry about, the naval gunfire and all that. Maybe it's at night, they don't see each other, and the destroyers snuck up and they're launching a salvo of long lance torpedoes or something. You just resolve that part, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my take on it. I want to say thank you to Cone. Wish me happy birthday. Thank you, Cone. Oh, and we're having a party, but Jan still hasn't showed up.
I know. I was waiting for him.
I was waiting for him to show up.
We could have used him last night. We were playing that crazy Catch Jack the Ripper game.
Oh, yeah. I caught Jack the Ripper, too.
Yeah,
I caught him. I
that.
nailed him.
Yeah.
I arrested that guy. Now, the funny thing is, I didn't arrest him for murder. I arrested him for his tag on his carriage was expired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He didn't have the right tags. He didn't pay the fee. And so I was like, wait a minute.
Right.
I'm going to take this guy in. He's got to pay this fee.
That's right. Give him a ticket.
Turned out he was Jack the Ripper. Who knew, right? Who knew? But at least I made the arrest of the 19th century. So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one mystery solved today on Coffee Kegs and Kriegspiel.
That's right. We caught Jack the Ripper.
Oh, man. He wasn't even remorseful. I remember that guy.
Yeah, go figure.
He was just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Just crazy stuff. But anyway, that's what I think you should do with the rules is just you can come up with any kind of rule system you want. The players don't need to know. Now, I am a fan of having some objectivity in the rules and in rolling dice. And it's not that I want to simulate luck so much, but I do want a certain level of objectivity from the umpires because every umpire has bias.
Mm-hmm.
And that bias can creep into their calculations consciously, I feel. That's why I think having a combat results table or something else is always beneficial to the system.
I think one of the problems with BogSat,
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest problems from my perspective is that it has a tendency to make things too mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
This versus this is clearly superior to this, therefore this wins. The problem is that that's not what actually happens because sometimes this is clearly superior to this, and yet this still loses because of something that happens at some point in the chain that screws everything up. Somebody leaves 3 cigars, or something. Something happens, or somebody gets confused and goes the wrong way, and whatever. That to me is where the dice really comes into play because there has to be, even if it's a small percentage, there has to be a percentage of chance that something catastrophic goes wrong for the superior force and it doesn't go the way they intended to.
This is where we need Jan to join the live stream and chime in. He probably bailed a long time ago.
He's asleep.
He's probably asleep like normal human. But the role of luck, because I think it was Tashwick. I can never say the name correctly, so Jan just looks at me. But saying that it really isn't. Oh, you know what? I think it's a straight up Clausewitz. It isn't really so much about luck. It's about strategy, And so, how much should luck be part of the calculation in the game? And maybe Jan will join the live stream. And see, he just typed in luck. He's luck. What?
Yeah. Well, I agree with Jan. I don't like the term luck, but we're kind of limited.
Serendipity, perhaps.
Something. We're kind of limited in our language, and so we use that as a sort of overall catch-all or because all of it is the consequences of decisions up and down the chain, you know, because it's
And you
not
don't
really
have perfect
random.
control over all those decisions.
Exactly. You clearly you don't. I mean, the guy, some adjutant leaves something at a campfire. I'm thinking of the Antietam campaign, of course. That that from your position, you have no control over that whatsoever. But it happens,
And look, he baited him out. He baited him out.
There he is. So is that luck? It's not luck. It was the consequence of a decision of some guy down the food chain who decided to do that, and you just don't have control over it. So it may seem kind of randomized, but it's not really randomized. It's the consequence of decision. But it's a decision that doesn't involve you.
Right. I'm going to see if I can.
Good morning, Jan.
Hello.
Morning. Well, for you, is it morning there or?
Not quite, right? 5:30 p.m.
See, they can hear him on the live stream, but I can't hear him. But that's okay.
I can't hear him either, so.
But that's okay. Now I can.
That's
I can
okay.
read his lips.
I think.
I read German. I read lips in German. So.
Yeah, I want my speakers to play sound.
It wouldn't be a coffee, cakes, and preschool if there were not technical difficulties, folks.
Yeah. But anyway. So Jan, tell us about luck, and we'll just try to read your lips. Tell us about luck. I can actually play the audio on.
There is no luck whatsoever.
It'll be delayed.
There it is.
Yeah, there will be delay. Yeah.
Let's see.
Let me look into my audio. Maybe it's me.
Oh boy! See,
Is it me?
I
No,
killed the speakers on here.
I have an audio level here in the settings.
Yes, I'm excited because I was telling him before he went live here that all those mornings during COVID when I thought I was dying, laying on the couch watching it on a Sunday morning, and here I am, where all the magic happens. Who would have guessed?
He's arrived.
The center of power.
Oh, I should hear it on here.
Hello.
Yeah, hello, Jan. Okay, I hear you. I hear you in here.
Yeah.
Now, if I create
Why don't you hear me on the speaker then? Why don't you hear me on the speaker then?
Oh, I can hear that.
Oh, I can't hear you guys anymore. Oh, hilarious.
David Grigsfield right here.
There you go. Okay,
This
Jan.
morning.
Okay, Jan. Tell us about luck.
About luck, well, there is no luck whatsoever in Kriegspiel. Well,
Right.
luck is, if we go back to Clausewitz, then he of course says war is like a game of cards.
Yeah.
Right? And then so many people then think, well, okay, if you play cards, then it's luck based because you have a random hand of cards and your enemy has a random hand of cards. But what Clausewitz then does is say, well, but you know the game, right? And you know the deck, or you should know the deck. And if you know the deck and the game, then you can sort of try to guess or analyze the abilities your enemy has, your opponent has. And then if you know your own hand and you know the game and you know the deck, then you know how to play your deck to counter the enemy and to win the war. So in the end, there isn't that much of luck there. Only that the initial disposition is randomized to some degree.
Okay, so what's up with these?
Yeah, the dice, right?
The
And
Kriegspiel dice.
then this weird Reiswitz guy comes, and actually he also uses a card game actually in the original game to determine some extraordinary situations. So if a player wants to do something extraordinary, they use a game of cards to resolve that. If they want to do something that's outside of the scope of the rules, they would use that card deck. But the dice, and that's one of the very first things Reiswitz writes about in his rules is, well, we need to introduce dice. We need to use dice to depict and he doesn't do that explicitly, but that's what's behind that. Is we need to realistically, to some degree, or to plausibly model the contingency of reality. That's what we would say today. He says there are situations in combat where the slightest notion of emotions on the shooter or on the unit will impact the combat tremendously.
Right.
And you cannot mathematically simulate that.
Mm-hmm.
There's no rigid rule to simulate that.
That's
right?
the subconscious bias I was talking about a few minutes
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so but still we can observe battles. We have experience about battles. We might know which factors impact the combat morale, if you want to call it that, or the psychological condition of the units. So then we can design a model that is basically a range of plausible outcomes. But which factor on that range actually applies to any given situation has to be determined randomly. But I would say, if the model, or if the scientific model behind it is properly done, then it's not luck based, even if you're rolling dice.
Right. So when I decided what kind of cake I wanted for my birthday, was that predetermined by physics, or was that me actually making a conscious, willful decision?
Did Marshall have agency?
Yeah.
Well, yes, you had. There might be factors you're not aware about that impacted your decision, but
yeah.
So you had it.
So
There's
however,
there's in historical science there's a whole discipline researching contingency and how societies and groups and individuals in the past try to cope with that, to overcome that, to understand it. When they talk about, when do people talk about luck or chance and those kind of things, and what's really behind that? That's usually always the case if they don't understand why things are happening. Right? So things are out of their scope, or they're too complex to grasp for them. They don't have in that historical period, they don't have the sort of worldview or understanding of the world or the mindset to see the factors, or even if they see them, then they don't relate them to the events. So then they need to find a way to express what's happening, and then it's either it's luck, or it's destiny, or it's chance, or what have you, God's will.
Right. Well, I do like to have a certain degree of objectivity in a game, but I think the word that I'm looking for is stochastic. And stochastic refers to a range of possibilities that's limited, a limited range of possible outcomes. And that's what dice do. Dice give you, like Kriegspiel dice, for example, actually give you a stochastic range based on, how close or how far you are to the target. And, that's acceptable to me. Like luck within a stochastic range is acceptable to me. But complete randomness or whatever, that's unreasonable, because that doesn't even exist in the real world. A force has a certain order of battle, and usually that order of battle is tailored to the kinds of missions that force would likely undertake based on geography and other situations. So, for example, if a force is engaged on an open plain, it's probably going to have a large cavalry contingent. If it's in a narrow pass, it might have a good artillery contingent or something, whatever. you know. But I don't like the idea when using a Bogsat system, which is a bunch of old guys sitting around a table. I don't like the idea that their biases can creep in and they end up either favoring the people, you know, their friends, if they're just playing a game casually, or they favor one side or another. And we're talking about Europe and Pacific over here. And I think the Japanese famously Kriegspieled the Battle of Midway, and did so with a very biased outcome. You know,
yeah, more importantly, they war gamed out the 3 different operations that they were considering, and in the Indian Ocean one, they gamed it out, and their final summary of the game was that they anticipated the British to have 4 to 5 carriers in the Indian Ocean, and they intended to sink all 7 of them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't even think they had that many carriers the whole war.
So it's, yeah.
They had like 2.
But in every case, as you say, even for the Midway operation, they gamed out the operation, but they gamed it with the assumptions that they were walking into it with, which was, I mean, the biggest assumption they made was that the Americans would actually come out to defend Midway and wouldn't be already there. Okay, what would happen if the Americans just happened to already be there? They didn't game that possibility, and they didn't game the idea that the Americans might just not defend Midway at all. And what happens if Nimitz doesn't send if we aren't reading their codes, which of course they don't know we're reading their codes, then why assume that the Americans are even going to send the fleet out to defend Midway?
Yeah,
because they can't sustainably hold it if they even do take it, you know. So that's just a bias. That's an assumption that they were making going into it, and those assumptions happen, especially in the military sphere. They happen all the time. You know, we make those kind of, and you can do it in this case too. It's like as a personal bias. If I'm bogsatting a battle, and as an American, and I think, okay, I've got an American armored division against an Iraqi armored division. My bias says we're going to sweep the floor with them. Okay?
but also your experience.
Yes, my experience does too, but it doesn't necessarily have to turn out that way. You know.
So how do you balance those? How do you say, you know what, I've got a bias, and I recognize my bias, but I also have real world experience because you were there with Muhammad. Or this is one of the later ones?
This was a little later when we were expanding the caliphate.
okay, that one. Sorry, you know, we're so old, Jan.
Yeah,
I
know. It's hard to remember.
Kind of run together, but you know, you do know from your experience how it's going to play out, and like people,
I know how it did play out.
Like Verdi von Waugh did away with all the rules, and he's like, you know, and later. You know, Kriegspiel, it was just like, we know from our experience, for example, in the Franco-Prussian War, how these things should go. The problem we run into is in the modern day, there's not too many people old like us who remember the Franco-Prussian War. So how do you model that when nobody around, you know, has that level of experience?
True, but those personal biases feed into that as well. I mean, there's like my entire life of reading history and that sort of thing feeds into that. I think, the Prussian army in 1870 is just this, you know, monster machine that, you know, isn't going to be beaten by the French. You know, it's just that's not going to happen. And so that bias is going to feed into my decisions if I'm simply making the decisions based off of myself. You know, if there's no other element. And I think, okay, so that in that case, equal force is never equal, because
bias will provide.
Yeah, I think this one is a superior organization, and therefore will beat this one on a one-to-one basis. But I'm going into that thinking that from the start, before they've ever fired a shot. Or to give the Iraq War example. My bias, our bias going into 1991, we don't know what's going to work and what isn't. We don't know that we're going to slice through them. We don't know that we're going to beat them. We don't know how effective Chorbam armor really is in combat because it hasn't been tested. We don't know any of those things, but we're going to make this assumption that we're just better than they are, and when our own guys, higher up the food chain, were making those decisions and gaming it out, they were already walking into it with the bias that we're just better than they are and we're going to beat them. But based on what? we don't know. We don't even know. I mean, what would happen if it had gone the other way and that stuff didn't work like it was advertised?
Right.
It would have been a very different fight,
So the question now becomes, if you're going to modify a game like Pacific and European Theater of Operations over there, or you're going to design any kind of a game using Kriegspiel mechanics, how do you solve for this problem? How do you solve the problem? Jan, what did the Prussians do about it?
Yeah, how did the Prussians game out the Pacific War?
in 12 words or less, tell us.
They had constant debates and and quite some debates, intense ones. It's sort of hilarious to read these articles they are writing back and forth in the public military journals, right? So everybody can read them. But they are really intense about what should be in the system, which should be neglected, and all those kind of things. So yeah, I don't think there is a good solution for that. It's just you just keep trying to improve your system by gaining different perspectives and trying to take into account what's out there, which is reasonable, and but you will never be able to design the one realistic system.
Yeah. So my solution, I think, is you use dice, but the dice calculate a stochastic range of outcomes,
Sure.
And that's really why you have a human umpire. I mean, I've had situations where you just have this bizarre outlier result, and the fact that outlier results happen or exist in history doesn't mean that as an umpire you should allow these strange one-offs all the time. But sometimes those one-offs make a big difference. I keep thinking of the Battle of Stalingrad, right? There's Pavlov's house, there's the grain elevator. There are these positions that small contingents of Soviet forces held during the Battle of Stalingrad that truly confounded the Germans and prevented them from saying, we have complete control of the city, even after they raised their flag.
There's a little bit of a myth around that, but yeah.
There is, yeah. But did these things happen? Well, yeah, I think they did happen to some degree. How decisive were they? Probably not very. But they happened. But that mythology that you just referred to sticks in people's heads, and they think now that's what makes it okay to have the outlier, to allow the outlier. But then, the outlier is messing up the whole scenario too. What do you do?
I think I'm curious about what you think, Jan, about how this is impacted by scale. For example, if I'm doing a Kriegspiel and I'm commanding a battalion, an infantry battalion, and so I send out my companies.
2 blocks.
Yeah, there you go.
2 blocks.
I send out my companies out there, and they're doing their thing, and one of my platoons from one of these companies, they come around a corner and they're in an alleyway as a 50-gallon oil can, and it's got an old school typewriter sitting on top of it, and some 19-year-old private from Omaha, Nebraska does what human instinct says he should do. He walks over and he does this on the key, and of course the 50-gallon drum is filled with explosives and it wipes out the entire platoon. I mean, you can't. How do you model that? You can't model that, but on that scale, losing an entire platoon out of a battalion can have a significant impact, right? But if I go up in scale, I've got hundreds of those kinds of incidents that are potential. The higher up I get up the chain, and how they impact the everything at scale. It's a kind of a fascinating problem to me. because it can be somebody way down the chain that is not modeled, that does something stupid, and the next thing you know, it impacts everything up and down the chain.
So how do we manage that? I guess we just have another big debate and write about it.
Yeah, and then we use dice.
Use dice.
We use dice.
Use dice.
Oh well, we solved it. There we go.
There we go. Why didn't they just use dice?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Random number generator.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
stochastic random number generator.
Yeah, that's true.
Because not every number in existence is on these dice.
There clearly has to be some taking into account the extreme.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the extreme is possible, but it's limited in its possibilities. But if you get a chain of those, it can have a much greater impact, right?
Yeah. So I guess the bottom line is no system is going to be perfect.
Nope.
You want to be.
It wouldn't be perfect.
You want to be
war isn't perfect.
Aware of your biases, and you want to come up with reasonable mechanics to solve those. And no, I don't think it's worth it to break up the whole umpire team because you can't agree. At the end of the day, if you don't agree, play a game of cards or roll a die or whatever and just solve it and move on. Because typically, I think these one-offs are not as important as we assume they are. Just as Jan pointed out, that there's a certain mythology about the outliers at the Battle of Stalingrad.
Sure.
I think that's true everywhere. And it's more likely to be true than not. I can't think of very many outlier events in history that made all the difference. Antietam being one of the rare examples where they found Lee's orders wrapped in cigars.
Sure.
And even then, I think it was a near-run thing.
It very much was, but it's because of how he reacted to.
Yeah.
I mean, Lee seeing McClellan suddenly start to act fast tells him something's up. I don't know what it is, but something's up, and I need to react to it.
Yeah.
And so he did, because he could read the man he was fighting.
Yeah.
If he was fighting somebody else, if that's Grant on the other side, it's a completely different outcome.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you have all of those possibilities, but they're happening to both sides. And in a way, they kind of tend to wash each other more often than not, because they are happening to both sides. They're presenting problems to both sides, and it's how you adjust or react to the problem that's presented by that really makes the difference. It's not that those things aren't going to happen, because they do. They happen in droves in any military operation. It doesn't matter. Even a peacetime movement of a unit from point A to point B has all of those types of things. Somebody gets lost and a third of the column goes the wrong direction, and all kinds of things happen like that. And I've
what are they doing in Omaha?
Yeah, I've seen that many times. But it's happening on both sides of the equation. It's never just one side that's getting outliers. It's both sides, and it's how they respond to it that really matters.
And then I guess it also always comes down to the purpose of the system. So, like, what do you really want to emphasize and model with that? And I would think that outliers probably have much more of an impact if we go back in time. The further we go back in time, like medieval battles or so on. But as we progress, so to say, to present day combat, because it's so much more granular, there are many more outliers, I would think, on a general basis, but they have much less effect on the overall battle outcome, right? So if you want to go down and model, tactical platoon combat for modern era, then you will have to put in a bunch of outlier results. If you want, however, to model battalion, brigade, modern combat, then you don't.
In the modern sphere, do you also incorporate the idea of in the outlier thing? It's not just human decision; it also is technical failure.
Oh yeah.
If I shoot off a battery of an MLRS battery and one of the missiles is goes like this and comes straight back down on the battery. Boom! I just took out my artillery battery, right? So
that happened to a Russian battery early in the Ukraine war.
Why does that not surprise me in the least?
That literally did happen. That's a thing.
They're also blowing themselves up with the Korean ammunition, right?
Yeah, and so in that particular event, I'm sure was critical to at the lower level of command, but overall, it hasn't really had a big impact on the war. Here we are in 2024,
right? March
of 2024, and we see how the war is just kind of grinding along, essentially indifferent to this bizarre event that, when it happened, everybody was like, oh, wow, look at that video. It serves them right. They got what they deserve. But really, it's just...
Well, it goes back to the scale thing. Because
that's what
if you're Kriegspieling out or gaming out just that particular unit, then that's a huge impact, okay? But if you're gaming out, an entire front, then that's just a blip, and okay, well, we got to replace that battery, So, okay, but I mean, so it has exactly
in line.
It's a question of scale in that case, is how much impact it has overall.
Well,
all right, guys, I have to leave you. Unfortunately, I have a stream scheduled, and I think also Dave is coming up, isn't he? In like 5 minutes with his stream.
Okay.
We didn't know whether he was doing it today or not.
Yeah,
he's in the chat, so he might be able to confirm.
But that's okay. But yeah, we're about to bounce as well, and we want to watch your shows. And I think the most important lesson here is be aware of your biases and take these things into account when you are designing a system or running an event. And as long as you're aware, what's that, like half the battle or something, as G.I. Joe used to say? Yeah, knowing is half the battle.
Knowing you have a problem. Knowing you have a problem is the first step.
I don't have a problem. What do you say? I don't have any problems.
Oh, Marshall. Denial.
All right, guys. Have a nice day. Take care. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Miniatures. Why would you accuse me? All right, guys. Well, time to wrap up. I do want to say thank you to Kurt, who wished me happy birthday. Kurt Keckley, good friend of mine. Thank you for the happy birthday wishes. It's just his Facebook user on here, but I looked him up because the Facebook comments don't sync properly. And thank you to Dave. And Dave, definitely go ahead with your show, and I hope you have a great episode. And
looking forward to watching it, Dave.
You got it. All right, everybody. Well, I hope that you did get some value amid all the jokes and humor here. I forgot what I was talking about, so I'm going to go now. So, all right. Everybody take care and goodbye, and thank you for joining me here at the house. Bye for now.